This story is called You're Gonna Fake It After All. What was it about her favorite jeans that brought her such serenity? They fit her like a glove, and she was right at home wearing them. Mysteriously, in her faded denim, she felt implicit confidence and ease. Perhaps she was so comfortable in them because they were worn till they were ragged. The more threadbare they were, the more relaxed she felt. Although they were shabby, they had become to her like an old, trusted friend. Somehow their frayed edges only endeared them to her heart deeper, and the many tattered defects made them cozier to put on. Like an old security blanket, they brought tranquility to her soul. Although some might consider them ratty, she quickly dismissed their foregone conclusion, believing they were only shackled by ignorance. To her, it was a trustworthy judgment to conclude that holes were simply fashionable and chic. In them she was free and felt truly liberated to face the day. What would she do without them? One day the unthinkable happened. To her horror, she went to try them on and discovered they were skin tight. She began the arduous task of cramming her body into them, but to her mortification, it was a tug-of-war to pull them past her hips. The more she attempted to jam her flesh into them, the more constricted they became. After many attempts to stuff her stomach in, they were simply unyielding, and the zipper was impassable. Although it was outlandish to believe she would achieve her desired outcome, she continued her frantic efforts by pushing repeatedly on her stomach to make it flat. This can't be, she mused. She would get them zipped as if it were the last thing she did. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Daring not to surrender at this point, she lay flat on the bed and tried to squeeze into them by sucking in her gut. Although ludicrous, she tried to rearrange the fat on her midsection, but no amount of pushing or stuffing would suffice. She wiggled and wiggled with the preposterous notion that she'd be able to get them zipped, but it was asinine to pretend any amount of squirming would prove to be victorious. It was safe to say they had stretched as far as possible. They would no longer zip, and she was inconsolable. Clearly there was only one plausible explanation, she thought. They had shrunk in the wash, and the dryer setting was too hot. She wanted to deny any responsibility for this horror, and refused to admit her evening binges on ice cream had anything to do with this ghastly, unspeakable outcome. But looking at her jeans with melancholy, she knew this was all her fault, and she felt humiliated. Her humiliation and embarrassment grew to disgust, but she could not imagine renouncing this habit of indulgence. She had no hope of championing the battle of the bulge with a radical departure from sugar. She simply could not refuse her cravings, and firmly believed she could not withstand the temporary suffering of delaying self-gratification. She had not miscalculated the fallacious notions that she'd be disciplined enough to achieve her goals. It was simply misconception to believe she could avoid the lure of sweets. Although rich desserts are an indulgence the overweight cannot afford, she did not misconstrue the amount of diligence needed to abstain from this nightly habit. Abstinence was not in her vocabulary, and she could not muster up the energy to stop yielding to her desires. Such a quandary to ponder. Although she yearned to fit back into them, she could not self-sacrifice. She was without excuse. It was an injury to her dignity that she could no longer fit into her jeans, and even though it was irrational, she continued to try and convince herself she did not need a bigger pair, and was still the exact same size. Folding them neatly, she put them back into the drawer. With longing in her heart, she told herself that one day she'd be able to fit back into them, and promptly walked to the freezer to comfort herself, and took another spoonful of ice cream. You're Gonna Fake It After All, sung to the tune of Love Is All Around, the theme from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Who can squeeze in jeans that fit no more? Who can win at tug-of-war by pulling them up lying on the floor? Well, it's you, girl, and if you suck in, you'll get them zipped and maybe they'll button. All that extra flesh tucked indiscreetly. As long as you inhale, you'll fit completely. You're still the same size after all. You're gonna fake it after all. Who pretends her jeans just shrunk a size? Who perceives they fit just right? Didn't know denim could fit that tight. Well, it's you, girl, so hold your bladder. Peeling them off is another matter. Once they're past your hips, if you're still breathing, you will take great comfort in believing your favorite jeans are not too small. You're gonna fake it after all. You're gonna fake it after all.